On the first page of Steplings, we enter Jason Sanborn's life on a Friday in late September of 2003, but the past 2 years have been rough on him. His mother died of ovarian cancer. His father had a brief relapse after 15 years of sobriety. Jason fell into a depressive funk that he treated with street drugs, and that led to his dropping out of high school last spring, just shy of graduation. Meanwhile, his girlfriend of many years has gone off to UT Austin on a full ride, hoping one day to become an orthopedic surgeon like her father. She graduated as her class salutatorian, and people say that if it hadn't been for Jason, she'd have been valedictorian. Early this summer, Jason's dad, Burl, met and married a divorcee he met at AA who has an 11-year-old daughter, Emily. And the bride and groom and the 2 children have been sharing Burl's and Jason's small home in Mesquite since August. Both kids hate this arrangement. Emily's father, Professor Vinny Patel, is on the physics faculty at UT, and Emily detests everything about her life in Mesquite. As she puts it, "I hate this place. My teacher said the Harry Potter books are full of Satan worship, and she asked me if I'd accepted Jesus Christ as my personal Lord and Savior. And I said in the first place my daddy is a Hindu, and that I believe in the separation of church and state, and it's a public school, and she didn't have any right to ask. So now they all act like I'm the devil and a witch. I hate it here." For Jason, the worst thing has been that on the night of Lisa's graduation party at her parents' big house on Barnes Bridge Road, he snuck drinks from the open adults bar and wound up taking an unauthorized joyride in a new Miata that her father had just given her as a graduation present. Later that night, he was involved in a fracas at a 7-Eleven that resulted in his being charged with assault. So, on this Friday morning when we meet him, he's mowing the lawn. He's been mooning about Lisa since she left 3 weeks ago, and he's written several emails professing his love and his loneliness, and he's working on writing a song for her that he hopes will keep him close in her heart. Also, his dad has phoned from work to say that come Monday morning, he and Burl and their lawyer will have to appear in court for a hearing about the assault charge. And in the middle of this mowing, a snail mail letter from Lisa comes that tries very unsuccessfully to let him down easily, but comes to a very predictable "can't we just be friends" conclusion. So he's devastated by this news, and so he just abandons the job and goes into his room to sort of nurse his wounds and sulk. So now we go to that late Friday afternoon when Burl, the father, comes home from work. As he drove closer to the house, the front lawn clarified into focus. Half the lawn was mowed, the mower stopped mid-mow, and the red gas can was smack in the curb on the walk by the curb. Aw, damn it to hell. He pulled in behind Lily's Civic, turned off his engine, shut his eyes. He counted slowly, silently to 10. God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. He went through the front door and heard voices from the kitchen. It occurred to him that he should give Jason the benefit of the doubt. Possibly Lily had interrupted Jason's work to ask for something, or maybe somebody called about a job while he was mowing and he was on the phone now or had gone to an interview. Possibly, though not probably, he'd actually scored a job earlier and had to report immediately. Through the arch into the kitchen, he saw Lily standing at the island in the pumps and slacks and blouse she'd worn to work. She was taking cartons from a KFC sack while Emily was setting plates onto the breakfast table. Before she'd taken up residence here, Burl had presumed that Emily was still at the age to seek parental approval by being helpful. But he'd learned otherwise. She'd do chores that Lily assigned, but not without griping, and Burl believed Jason was a bad influence. She seemed mired in a teenager's sulk, even though she was only 11. He tried his best to be careful with her. Her wounds from the divorce were still tender, he could tell, and she idolized her father. Emily's father had yet to exercise the joint custody rights he'd sought and won in court, but despite this, the poor kid believed she'd be better off with her dad and resented being in Lily's custody. Burl knew, without even testing it, that Emily wouldn't welcome his efforts to be fatherly, and that put him in a tricky position. He couldn't discipline the child, and Lily had yet to give over any parenting to him. He worked to stay friendly, though this kid resisted it. She was a bookish know-it-all who spent far too much time on her computer, and while she didn't exactly sass Burl, She spoke to him with a veiled impatience that suggested her reserve of politeness was being worn thin by having to speak to an idiot. She was not what he would have preferred in an 11-year-old stepdaughter. She was not a tree-climbing, horse-loving tomboy in a t-shirt and blue jeans with a shelf of Barbies and a burning inn to go to church or scout camp and dress up in mommy's clothes. They looked up when he entered, and Lily said, "Hi, sweet," nicely, but she did sound tired, and Burl moved to hug her, though she had her hands full, and kiss her forehead. He was aware of Emily's large brown eyes on them. "Hello, Emily. How was school?" "Suck boogers." "Emily," said Lily. Her reply was much too like what he'd get from Jason. He smiled falsely at her. "Wouldn't that be 'It's suck boogers, sir?' Or 'It's suck boogers, Mr. Sanborn. Thanks for asking.'" She shot him a split-eyed, sideways glance, but had trouble hiding her involuntary grin quick enough. He'd almost won her over momentarily, but she wasn't about to concede that. "Sorry." He passed on, objecting to the spirit of her apology, and chose to pursue another battle. "Where's Jason?" "In his room, I suppose," said Lily. "Do you know if he went for that job interview?" he asked Lily. "I have no idea," Lily said tightly. "You'll have to ask him." Burl sighed. "He'll probably lie," he said to no one in particular, looking for sympathy. "No surprise there," shot Lily. Her vehemence alarmed him, and he replayed it as he trudged reluctantly toward Jason's room. Maybe they'd had an ugly exchange when Lily came home and he'd stormed off to his room. About anything set him off these days, and Burl's phone call about the hearing wouldn't have improved his humor, that was for sure. Lily wasn't used to dealing with teenagers, and it turned out she didn't have a lot of patience with them. Whatever patience she'd been blessed with had been strained by successive revelations about Jason's scrapes with the law that she'd been given, rationed out, really, you could say, in the weeks following the wedding. For a while she'd acted sympathetic. Her attitude had been, "Poor kid lost his mother. We need to cut him some slack." Now it was, "We've all got our troubles, sonny boy. Get over it and get on with your life." Burl pecked at the door with a knuckle. Then, when he got no response, he knocked with his fist, a single big wham like a judge's gavel. "Jason!" A muted scuffling and a rustle. Then Jason opened the door maybe 4 inches to offer a slim rectangle of face with one eye. "Yeah." Annoyed, Burl pushed the door into him with his fingertips, and Jason backpedaled to his desk and stood with his arms folded across his chest. Headphones yoked his neck like a horse collar. The window had been flung open hastily, knocking the blinds askew. Another flagrant violation. Jesus H. Christ, where to start with this kid? "I've asked you not to smoke in the house, Jason." "I had the window open." "That's not the point. I didn't say it was okay if you opened the window. But I don't see..." Burl brandished his palm to stop him. "Did you and Lily have an argument?" "No. Why?" Jason leaned forward as if to see something in the distance more clearly, something he loathed. "Did she say something?" "Never mind. Can you tell me why you're sitting in here diddling off instead of finishing your job out front?" Jason smirked. "Diddling off?" Burl let that sail past. "What have you been doing all day? How hard is it to mow the damn lawn anyway? I ask you to do something a 12-year-old can handle, and when I get home I see a half-assed job with all the tools just tossed around like you're 6 blasted years old and nobody taught you to put things up." "I tossed the mower around?" "You left the gas can sitting on the walk." "Oh my God, call 911. Burl frowned. Even for Jason, these provocations were over the top, as if Jason were testing whether sufficient goading might produce a major heart attack in his father or make his head pop off. "Don't get smart, son. Did you go to that interview today at Blockbuster, or did you just lie to me about it in the first place?" "No, I didn't lie, and I didn't go down there today because the manager isn't in on Fridays." "The manager takes Fridays off?" "Jesus, Dad, I don't know what goes on down there. Call and ask yourself if you don't believe me." "Maybe I just will." "Fine." They worked to a stalemate. Burl had gotten absolutely no satisfaction on any point raised. He stood digging at his sweat-damp waistband with a thumb and watched as Jason averted his gaze and slowly folded portions of himself one by one like a carpenter's wooden ruler into his desk chair. He acted as if their next phase might involve Burl's decision to relent and remove himself, and Jason was anticipating it by taking a seat, giving Burl a preview, as it were, of what Jason's peace might be like without Burl there to disturb it. Jason astonished him these days with his rudeness and utter disregard for Burl's authority. Confronted about the mowing job, he didn't even offer an excuse. He mocked Burl for objecting. Incredible. When Jason, without even glancing Burl's way, parted the headphone collar with a speaker in each hand, stretched them like pulling taffy, lifted them up, and settled them firmly over his ears, it was more than Burl could stand. From the kitchen, Lily and Emily heard their raised voices. Emily looked up from her chore of setting out the ketchup and Burl's green Tabasco sauce and over to Lily as if for a cue as to how she was supposed to handle this. Understandably, it made her uneasy. Jason's father always seemed on edge to her, and though she'd not witnessed anything violent since she'd moved here, most of the words between this father and son were a harsh melody with an underlying ominous pedal tone like horror movie music. Burl was bigger, older, the father, and so Emily identified with the child. Lily didn't appear to have heard anything, or if she had, she wasn't going to act as if it were out of the ordinary. Emily stood at the breakfast table, head cocked so she could observe her mother. Lily continued to bang the cabinet doors as she moved plates and bowls and spoons about on the counter, then set about transferring the chicken pieces, the mashed potatoes, and the coleslaw from the cartons on the island. She was uneasy about the fight too, but she hesitated to say anything about it. She continued to spoon out the potatoes and slaw as if the schedule somehow included this brouhaha in Jason's bedroom, that it was on the agenda for Burl and the boy like watching up or checking the mail. Showing Emily she herself was rattled might alarm her child. She was walking on eggs these days anyway with Emily, doing her best to make her feel at home here, making herself feel at home here, struggling to induce Emily to believe that this life in this house was the best that Lily could do. It was also the best that could be done. Mom? What, hon? Lily said cheerfully. She stole a sideways glance at her daughter, read nothing in the child's profile, but everything in her creepy, robotic placing and repositioning the two condiments on the table. Lily felt a twinge of guilt and said, "It's nothing." She smiled. "Boys, they play rough." Then a shout, a loud kaboom, another shout, a clomp clomp like someone tumbling downstairs, though the house had no stairs, a pause, and in it both mother and daughter stared wide-eyed at each other, Lily unable to hide her shock. Emily stepped back from the table suddenly as if the fight were transpiring on its very surface, clutching the jug of ketchup through her chest. They heard Jason's bedroom door open and voices again, not raised, but urgent, Jason saying, "You okay, Dad?" And Burl saying, Yeah, it'll be all right. And they emerged from the dim light into the kitchen. Burl was bent with a palm pressed to his forehead, that hand outlined in red, and a rivulet coursing down his wrist. "What happened? What's the matter?" "It's okay," said Burl. He straightened and stepped around Lily to the sink. "Bumped my head." He bent over the sink, lowered his palm, and inspected his hand. Blood gushed from a cut over his brow. "Let me look at that." Lily moved beside him, pushing her fingers against his forehead, bending over the sink with him. "Wow, that's deep. What happened?" "We thought you were fighting," accused Emily. "Oh, no, hon," Burl tossed over his shoulder. "I tripped and banged my noggin on Jason's desk, that's all. It'll be okay in a minute." "But you were arguing," she insisted. "We do it all the time," put in Jason merrily, as if it were a sport. "Do we have any Band-Aids?" "It'll take more than a Band-Aid," said Lily. She folded several swatches of paper towel into a compress and handed it to him. "Keep pressing on it." Burl clapped the pad to his forehead and winced. "What about hydrogen peroxide?" asked Emily. "Or neosporin?" Nobody spoke or moved. They all appeared to be waiting for someone else to take charge. "Let me see it now," Lily said, as if the waiting had been for the injury to heal. She gently lifted Burl's splayed paw, looked around the edge of the sopping compress. "You're going to have stitches in that thing or it'll never heal. I saw a doc in the box over there by the mall." She took Burl by the arm and he allowed himself to be steered away from the sink. "Emily, you come too." Emily said, "Do I have to?" "Yes, now. Oh, let the girl eat her supper. Jason too. No telling how long this will take. No point in having her sit there for hours with sick folks coughing and sneezing all over her." For this very first instance of intervening in the matter between the child and her mother, Burl was granted the blessing of an oblique gratitude, though it would need to be decoded from what showed up on Emily's face as she swung her head up to meet her mother's gaze. A bit of glitter in her eye. "Don't blame me if he contradicts you. You married him. Maybe I can look forward to more of this." Lily now faced the difficulty of losing face by conceding to good sense, but the sight of blood smeared on Burl's arm and blooming red through the paper towels, drizzling along the sink rim like raspberry sauce on a dessert plate, and glittering in a trail of ruddy dimes on the kitchen floor like evidence in a crime scene, it jangled and buzzed her decision system out of commission. Fine, she pointed the mother finger at Emily, but no funny business, you hear? Emily rolled her eyes and turned her head. No, I mean it. Do you understand me? Yes, Emily said, and then added, ma'am. And you are to clean up the kitchen when you finish eating, you hear? Before Emily could even respond, Lily suddenly whirled on Jason and gave him the same finger. That goes for both of you. Her reward for her first effort to parent the two equally was Jason's deadpan poker face that Burl knew from long experience was like a drawn shade behind which thieves conjure up their schemes. Well, when the parents leave, Jason decides that he has to go to Austin to talk to Lisa about this letter that he got. And Emily sort of blackmails him into taking her along. They hit the road hitchhiking, and hours later they get picked up by two guys in an old van. And the guys are apparently Africans, and they stop along the way to pick up trash from the road, and they explain that they are on their way to Houston to attend a reunion of other Africans, and that they are fishermen, that they stop along the road and they scavenge the roadside to get all kinds of things, including a whole drink cans, aluminum soda cans that Emily and Jason are sitting on a whole bag of them there in the back of the van. So this goes on for a while, and finally the Africans stop at a picnic area where they set up a tent outside of the picnic area and leave Jason and Emily to sleep in the van. And in the morning, Jason wakes up and he sees that Emmanuel, one of the two Africans, is cooking something over a fire, and he gets out of the van, he goes to sit with him, and the African offers him a breakfast of scrambled eggs and chilis and roti, which Jason gratefully asked. And then he asked Emmanuel how he and his cousin Jacob came to be in the U.S. Emmanuel said that he and his cousin and their friends in Houston were meeting to celebrate their arrival in the U.S. 5 years ago. Church groups brought them over from refugee camps where they'd been for many years. They were sent to different cities. They were just boys then. They knew nothing. They were put in apartments together, and someone from the churches would deliver groceries and teach them how to use the gas stove and the refrigerator. The refrigerator? Asked Jason. Emmanuel nodded, smiling. Yes, if you have a box in the window that makes cold air and a bigger box standing up in the room that does the same, how do you know to keep the door to that one closed? Here the new world around them was strange and frightening. Think of all in your home that you operate without any thought of how you learned their secrets. Can openers, lamps, flush toilets, telephones, doorbells, garbage grinders, hot and cold water faucets, furnace thermostats, toaster ovens. Outside the door lurked even larger unknowns, some dangerous, all bewildering. Traffic lights, vending machines, elevators and escalators, automatic doors, bus and train routes, the English language. Emmanuel and his fellow refugees were born in villages of thatched huts to a people who raised crops and cattle. He told Jason how the Janjaweed rolled through the village, killing men and raping the women and setting fire to the crops in the houses. Everyone who could fled into the countryside. He was only 5. The Arab raiders killed his father and 2 of his older brothers and took a sister away from them. They took many young girls. He and his mother and others walked for many miles for many weeks. Once they had to cross a river filled with crocodiles, and one child was snatched from its mother's arms and eaten. Jason controlled an impulse to blurt, "Fucking crocodiles? No shit?" He sat very still, listening. He'd never heard anything like this, and it made him wonder how much of this kind of thing was going on now, out there beyond the near border of his ignorance and in the world. Who were these raiders? Why did they do this? This African fellow, his host who had generously shared his breakfast, had lived in some part of the planet Earth that operated under entirely different rules and subjected its inhabitants to horrific circumstances. Maybe more of the planet was like this than he'd ever dreamed. Everything about these men impressed Jason. He felt as if he and they belonged to a tribe of wanderers, and in the dawn light suffused with the pleasant dampness of morning air, this impromptu encampment seemed blessed with an aura of superiority. His nape tingled with pleasure at this experience of meeting these Africans, sleeping in the van, eating that breakfast with the Indian bread, hearing that story. These guys were so fucking cool. Definitely song-worthy. Their lives were so much richer and full of tragedy and purpose than the dweebs and slackers he knew in Mesquite, that he stumbled spontaneously onto this rich experience with something to be grateful for. It twanged his songwriting nerve. He pictured himself playing this new tune about these adventures for Lisa. First they were alone, sitting on a blanket beside Town Lake, and then the scene segued to a small club on 6th Street, an intimate stage with a single spot over a single stool, and he comes from the wings and he takes the stool with his guitar and sings, and she's at a table right in front. She hadn't known he was in town even, had just shown up there with a roommate or a friend. Now that he'd been befriended by these Africans, his intrinsic value as a person of merit and potential had soared. Jacob and Emmanuel initiated him into the underdog pack. Now he knew what was truly valuable, what was not. That was the heart of the song. From here on out, he would be a more serious, mature person. Lisa would be the first to hear about it. While he was ruminating with relish about his recreated identity as a person of superior moral weight and his rosy future in that persona, Emily slung her backpack onto the table, sat across from him. She rummaged about in the pack. She looked grumpy, her hair a thrasher punk's spiky dew. Emmanuel will make you some eggs. Saying it, he felt as if he were one of the Africans' party, the host. I hate eggs. She squinted into the opening of the pack, then her little hand darted like the head of a striking snake into the cavity and out again. She'd snagged a Nutri-Grain granola bar. She started worrying the wrapper. The thing was like an insult to him somehow, like her computer and cell phone and the TV in her room, and now this, her unexamined presumption that food would be available to her as a matter of entitlement to accept or reject, even with contempt. Well, that needed correcting. Since he now belonged to the club of underdogs, he was qualified to give moral instruction. You should offer to share that with them. She stopped chewing and frowned. Why? I'm not eating any of their eggs. Well, you should share it with people who are less fortunate than you are. They've been through all kinds of terrible stuff. Well, like what? It's not something a child should hear. Oh, I bet they're from the Sudan, Darfur, right? We saw a documentary about them in school in Austin. It was called The Lost Boys. I bet that Jacob and Emmanuel even know some of them. Maybe they were even in the movie. It's still going on over there. It's genocide now. Even President Bush said so. You can go online and read all about it. She licked the honeyed fleck of grain off her fingertip and shot him a wicked little smirk. Anyway, you're so worried about it, give them your granola bar. Well, the Africans want to explore the Trinity Riverbank before they go on, and Jason wants to go with them, and Emily and Jason argue about that, and she agrees that she's going to stay in the van while he's gone, but when he comes back, returning to the van, they found that Emily was gone. Emily! He yelled, circling in the shoulder and scanning the woods to the other side of the highway. Heart thundering in his throat, he danced antsily in place, hoping that she'd merely wandered away looking for them, but a glance inside showed him her pack was missing. Damn her. Jacob and Emmanuel watched in silence as he stomped about the van, his anger radiating a force field, keeping them at a respectful distance. Jason trotted along the fence line, peering into the woods. He kept screaming for her. Then he crossed over the highway, marking time momentarily as he was buffeted by the backwash of a tanker, hollered her name into the stand of trees. He was heartsick. His only responsibility had been to see that she arrived at her father's house safe and sound, and he flunked this test royally. God only knew what could happen to a little girl alone on the road with her thumb out, and he'd be blamed. Rightly so, too. He should have made her come with him. Shouldn't have trusted her in the first place. He knew she was a devious little shit. Images unreal like a fast-forward montage, Emily's thumb, the leering smirk of a meth-addled trucker, the kid trapped in the cab, Lily sobbing over the crumpled form of her only child lying nude in a shallow grave. He could explain, couldn't he, why she had run away with him? That he'd had no choice? That she was going to do it alone if not with him? Now, though, he saw that he'd had another option, staying home himself and keeping her there by force until his dad and Lily came back. Then he could have slipped off later in the night out his window, but no, he'd been in such a fucking hurry. His head was 10 feet up his ass. Jacob said, "You think the child is doing the thumb?" He mimed, itching. "Well, I guess, but I hope not." Emmanuel said, maybe she's walked ahead. We can go look. Would you mind? I could stay here if you wouldn't mind doubling back. We could buy you some gas, you know. Jacob waved away the offer. He opened the driver's door and took the seat while Emmanuel loaded their sacks and items gathered on the hut. Then he stepped up into the passenger side. Jacob started the engine while Jason was standing beside the open rear door, and it occurred to him that if they didn't find Emily, they might decide to drive on. Hey, hold it a second. Let me get my gear. He stepped into the van to retrieve his pack and the guitar, then heard Emily screaming, "Wait, wait!" There she is. She was running out of the woods, hugging her pack in her arms like a grocery sack, one arm waving frantically. Jason tumbled out and paced beside the van, legs trembling. At the fence, Emily tried to hurry between the strands, lifted the pack through and set it on the ground, swerved through the barbs, hopping on one foot as she cleared the wires, snatched up the pack, came at a dead run, hair flying in the wind. He trotted down into the bar ditch to confront her. "You were going to leave, weren't you?" She danced about him, furious, chin quivering. "Where the hell have you been? I looked for you. How could you go off like that? I thought you were out there." He waved wildly to the highway as if the ribbon of asphalt led straight to the dark mouth of the underworld. "You have any idea how that scared the crap out of me? Where were you?" "I went looking for you guys. Emily, you scared the bejesus out of me. You know that? You said I should go on alone if I wanted to. You knew I didn't mean it. And you should know I wouldn't have either. Why'd you take your pack with you then?" She turned away, shoulders sunk inward like folded, stubby wings. He couldn't read her silence, but usually when she got this way, she was sulking, resisting interrogation. It irritated him no end. He'd rather argue outright than deal with stony pouting. "Why'd you take your pack if you weren't going to go off alone?" He put a hard detective's edge to the question. "I needed it." He thought maybe she meant needed it to put things in she might find, but she added, "In case I came back and you were gone, I wouldn't have my stuff with me." It was gradually sinking in on him how little she trusted anyone. "You actually thought I would leave you here?" She shrugged. A quick, violent spasm rippled her back. He sighed. "Emily, look at me." She raised her sorrowful face. Her lashes were plastered together with tears. He raised his right hand. "I swear to you right here and now that I won't let you out of my sight between now and when we get to your dad's and he says everything's okay, all right?" Something glittery sharp flicked through her eyes for an instant, as if she'd heard this before, and the temptation to believe it was hurtful in itself. "I promise, I swear on my grandmother's grave." This only seemed to puzzle her. "What can I do to make you believe me?" This did interest her. Maybe it's a challenge. Her lips pursed. She bit her upper lip, frowning. She pointed to the fence. "Smash your guitar over the top of that post." "Emily, come on." "Well, then you don't really mean it now." "Of course I do. Look, if somebody kidnapped you and the ransom was my guitar, I guarantee you I'd give it up to get you back. But if I bust it up like you're asking, well, then I won't be able to play the Emily song for you." "The Emily song?" Jason nodded, grinning. "How's it go?" "Right time and place, kiddo, not here and now." "Really, you wrote a song for me?" "Uh-huh." "You better have." She shifted the pack on her arm, and the paw of an animal suddenly waggled through the partly unzipped top. "What the heck is that?" She set the pack on the ground, dipped her hands into it, and drew out a cat and cradled it like a baby. "It's a kitty. He's just like Marvel, the one I used to have." "Emily, where'd that cat come from?" "I found him in the woods." "He's a wildcat then. He should stay there." She turned a defiant face at him. "He has a flea collar." Sure enough, a faded plastic band. "Well, then he's somebody's pet and they're going to be looking for him. You better just leave him right there." "I'm not going to leave him. He's starving." Jason could feel the minutes ticking away and worried about straining the patience of their hosts. He clearly wasn't going to argue Emily out of dumping this beast here, but he could hope they'd find a suitable home, such as a truck stop dumpster or with another feline family later on. "Well, just don't give it a name. His name is Trippy. I named him that because I found him on this trip." Cradled in Emily's arms, the yellow-eyed cat stared at him evenly. "So,